The sun hung like a fiery eye in the cloudless Arizona sky, watching as Theodora Larson crawled through the scorched desert sand. Her once fine traveling dress was torn and filthy, her lips cracked from dehydration, and her honey blonde hair matted with dust and blood. 3 days ago, she had been traveling in a stagecoach bound for Tucson. Now, abandoned by the very men she'd trusted to protect her, she was certain she would die in this merciless wasteland. The Coulter gang had attacked at dawn. The driver and shotgun guard were killed instantly. The passengers herself, an elderly couple, and a banker from St. Louis were robbed of everything valuable. The elderly couple was shot when the husband foolishly reached for a hidden derringer. The banker had pleaded for his life and was pistol-whipped into unconsciousness. Thea had expected to join the dead. Instead, the leader, a man with eyes cold as winter ice, had ordered her dragged from the coach. He'd smiled cruelly as his men tied her hands and forced her onto a horse. They'd ridden for hours, deeper into the desert, before the leader finally halted. "This is far enough," he'd announced, cutting her bonds and shoving her roughly to the ground. "Walk back toward the road if you want. Won't make no difference. Sun'll cook you before you make it halfway." Then they'd laughed, taken her canteen, and ridden away, leaving her alone in the vast emptiness. That had been 3 days ago. Or was it 2? Thea couldn't remember anymore. Time blurred as she stumbled through the desert, seeking shelter during the brutal days and walking through the freezing nights, guided only by stars she barely understood. Her silk dress offered no protection against the elements, and her fashionable boots had rubbed blisters that now oozed and burned with every step. She had found a small cactus yesterday and desperately tried to extract moisture from it, remembering stories she'd read. The effort had yielded barely a mouthful of bitter liquid and left her hands punctured with tiny spines. Now, as midday approached on what she was certain would be her final day alive, Thea collapsed onto the burning sand. The distant mountains wavered in the heat. She thought of her parents back in Boston, who would never know what happened to their only daughter. They had warned her against traveling west, but she had been determined to take the teaching position in Tucson to escape the suffocating constraints of Eastern society. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice a hoarse rasp. "I was a fool." She closed her eyes against the glare, too exhausted to crawl beneath the scraggly bush that offered the only shade nearby. It didn't matter anymore. She would rest, just for a moment, and then the rhythmic thud of hoofbeats penetrated her fading consciousness. A hallucination, surely. Another cruel trick of the desert. She kept her eyes closed, unwilling to face disappointment. The hoofbeats stopped. A shadow fell across her face, blessed relief from the sun's assault. Then a voice, deep and rough, edged like stone. "Madam, can you hear me?" She forced her eyes open. A man loomed above her, his face shadowed by the brim of a dust-covered Stetson. For a terrifying moment, she thought the Coulter gang had returned to finish what they'd started. "Please," she tried to say. But no sound emerged from her parched throat. The man knelt beside her, and with gentle hands, lifted her head. Something cool and wet touched her lips, a canteen. Water trickled into her mouth, the most exquisite sensation she'd ever experienced. "Easy now," the man cautioned when she tried to gulp. "Too much too fast will make you sick." He allowed her a few more careful sips before capping the canteen. Thea blinked, her vision clearing enough to see her rescuer properly. Sun-browned skin, eyes the color of a stormy sky, and a jaw shadowed with several days' growth of beard. Not young, but not old either, perhaps 30 or 35. His clothing was trail-worn and practical. Faded denim trousers, a checked shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms, and a leather vest. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "Theodora," she whispered. "Theodora Larson." "Miss Larson, I'm Nathan Keller." His eyes took in her condition, the torn dress, the blistered feet, the sunburned skin. "What in God's name happened to you?" "Robbers," she managed. "Stagecoach, left me to die." A hardness entered his expression. "The Coulter gang?" She nodded weakly, surprised. "You know them?" "Everyone in these parts knows them," he said grimly. "Been terrorizing the territory for 2 years now." He scanned the horizon, then returned his attention to her. "You're in a bad way, Miss Larson. I need to get you to shelter, but we're a long ride from any town." Thea felt consciousness beginning to slip away again. "I'm dying, aren't I?" Nathan Keller's hand gripped hers firmly. "You're not dying here," he said with quiet conviction. "Not today. Not while I have breath in my body." Those were the last words Thea heard before darkness claimed her. When she awakened, she was indoors. Rough wooden walls surrounded her, and she lay on a narrow bed covered with a patchwork quilt. Her ruined dress had been replaced by an oversized man's shirt, and her wounds had been cleaned and bandaged. For a moment, she wondered if she had died after all, but the pain in her body quickly dispelled that notion. "Welcome back," said a familiar voice. Nathan Keller sat in a chair near the bed, whittling a piece of wood. Sunlight streaming through a small window suggested it was morning. "How long?" she asked, her voice still raspy. 2 days." He set aside his carving and poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "You've been drifting in and out. Fever broke last night." He helped her sit up enough to drink. "My place isn't much, but it's better than dying in the desert." Thea looked around at the simple cabin, one room with a stone fireplace, a table and 2 chairs, shelves holding books and supplies, and a few pieces of sturdy furniture. Nearby, a rifle hung on pegs above the door. "Thank you," she said, "for saving my life." He shrugged, seemingly uncomfortable with gratitude. Any decent person would have done the same. "But you were the only one there," she pointed out. "Why were you out in that wasteland?" "I was tracking mustangs." He moved to the stove, where something bubbled in a pot. "Been trying to catch a particular stallion for weeks, black as midnight with 1 white sock. Smart devil keeps evading me." "You're a horse trader?" "Among other things." He ladled broth into a bowl. "I break horses, do some ranching, hunt when necessary, whatever keeps food on the table." He brought the bowl to her, and Thea realized how desperately hungry she was. The simple broth tasted better than the finest meal she'd ever had in Boston. "My ranch is small," Nathan continued, "but it's mine, paid for free and clear. 10 acres, good water from a spring that never runs dry, enough grazing for my horses and a few cattle." "It sounds wonderful," Thea said sincerely. After her ordeal, this humble cabin seemed like paradise. "Once you're stronger, I'll take you to Copper Springs. It's the nearest town, about 15 miles east. They have a doctor there, and a hotel where you can stay until you decide what to do next." The thought of leaving this sanctuary filled Thea with unexpected dread. "My destination was Tucson," she said. "I'm to be the new school teacher there." Nathan nodded. "Tucson's a good 3 days' ride from here. Terrain's rough, and the Coulter gang is still out there. You're in no condition to make that journey yet." "I have nothing," Thea realized aloud. "They took everything, my money, my clothes, my teaching credentials. All I had was in my trunk on that stagecoach." "The stage line might compensate you for your losses," Nathan suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. "Or the town of Tucson might still honor your teaching contract." Thea forced herself to sip more broth, though her appetite had suddenly diminished. The reality of her situation was overwhelming. Alone in the Arizona territory, destitute, dependent on the kindness of a stranger. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "You don't need to decide anything right now," Nathan said firmly. "First, you need to heal. Everything else can wait." Over the next week, Thea regained her strength under Nathan's care. He was a surprisingly gentle nurse for a man who lived such a rugged life. Each day he changed the bandages on her feet, applied salve to her sunburned skin, and prepared simple but nourishing meals. He lent her clothing shirts that hung like dresses on her frame, and trousers she had to cinch tight with rope, and washed her tattered dress, though it remained irreparably damaged. During the day he would leave to tend his animals and check his trap lines. But he never strayed far from the cabin. In the evenings he read to her from his small collection of books, mostly practical manuals on ranching and horse training, but also a volume of Tennyson's poetry that surprised her. "It was my mother's," he explained when he saw her expression. "She came west with my father when this was still Mexican territory, brought her books and her dreams of making something grand out of this wilderness." "What happened to them?" Thea asked. Nathan's face tightened. "Apache raid, winter of '58. I was 15, away hunting. Came back to find the cabin burned and, well, not much else to tell." Thea reached out and touched his hand. I'm sorry." He nodded once, accepting her sympathy without comment, then continued reading as if the moment of vulnerability had never happened. As days passed, Thea began to learn more about Nathan Keller. He was 33, had fought briefly in the Civil War on the Union side, and had worked as everything from a cattle driver to a silver miner before settling on his small ranch 5 years ago. He had a reputation in Copper Springs as a loner, but an honest man who could be counted on in times of trouble. In turn, she told him about her life in Boston, her childhood in a merchant's family, her education at a progressive women's academy, and her decision to become a teacher. She explained how the suffocating expectations of Eastern society had driven her west, where she hoped to find independence and purpose. "My parents wanted me to marry the son of my father's business partner," she confessed one evening as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "Thomas Worthington is a perfectly acceptable man, wealthy, educated, polite, and completely without passion or conviction about anything." Nathan chuckled. "And you're overflowing with both." Thea smiled, surprised by his insight. "Yes, I suppose I am. My father says it's my greatest flaw." "Out here, it's a necessity," Nathan said. "Passion keeps you fighting when common sense says to give up. I've seen plenty of sensible men die in this territory, while stubborn fools somehow survive." "Which are you?" she asked, genuinely curious. The corner of his mouth lifted in a half-smile. "A stubborn fool, according to most who know me." By the 10th day, Thea's feet had healed enough that she could walk around the cabin without pain. Her sunburn had faded to a golden tan that would have scandalized her mother, and the desert's harshness had begun to feel less like an enemy and more like a challenging companion. That morning, Nathan announced his plan to ride into Copper Springs for supplies. "The doctor should check you over," he said, "and you'll need proper clothing if you're to continue on to Tucson." "Yes, of course," Thea agreed, though the thought of leaving Nathan's cabin filled her with unexpected melancholy. "Though I still don't know how I'll pay for anything." "I've been thinking about that," Nathan said, somewhat hesitantly. "The schoolmaster in Copper Springs left last month, married a widow from Prescott, and moved there. The town's been looking for a replacement." Thea's heart quickened. "You think they might hire me? Without credentials?" "Worth asking. Beggars can't be choosers, and they're begging for someone who can teach reading and ciphering to their children." Hope bloomed in Thea's chest. Copper Springs wasn't Tucson, but it was a chance to fulfill her dream of teaching, and it was close enough that she could still see Nathan, occasionally, a thought that warmed her more than it should have. "Let me get ready," she said, suddenly eager. "How long is the ride?" "About 3 hours at an easy pace," Nathan replied. "But you're not coming today." Thea's enthusiasm deflated. "But you just said—" "I said the doctor should see you, and he will when I bring him back here tomorrow. You're not strong enough for the journey yet." "I most certainly am," Thea protested. "I've been cooped up in this cabin for over a week. I need to get out. To see something besides these 4 walls." Nathan's expression hardened. "Miss Larson, you nearly died in that desert. Your body needs more time to recover." "My body is fine," she insisted stubbornly, "and I'm tired of being treated like an invalid." "Then stop acting like one," he snapped. A smart woman would know her limits. Thea felt heat rise to her cheeks. "And a gentleman would not presume to dictate what a lady can and cannot do." They glared at each other for a long moment before Nathan exhaled sharply. "Fine. You want to ride to town? We'll leave in 30 minutes, but don't expect me to carry you when you faint halfway there." "I will not faint," Thea said with dignity, "and I'll be ready in 20 minutes. True to her word, Thea was prepared to depart in less than 20 minutes. She had washed her face, combed her hair into a simple braid, and put on the cleanest of Nathan's shirts and the trousers she'd been wearing, cinched tightly at the waist. She looked nothing like a proper Boston lady, but she was clean and presentable enough for a frontier town. Nathan eyed her critically when she emerged from the cabin. "You'll need this," he said, holding out a wide-brimmed hat. "Sun's fierce today." She accepted it without comment, recognizing the gesture as his way of making peace. He helped her mount his second horse, a gentle mare named Daisy, and showed her how to adjust the stirrups to accommodate her shorter legs. The ride to Copper Springs was beautiful and difficult by turns. The desert landscape took Thea's breath away, rugged mountains in the distance, strange and wonderful cacti, and occasionally wildflowers that had somehow found enough moisture to bloom. But the heat was oppressive, and the rocking motion of horseback riding used muscles Thea hadn't known she possessed. By the time the small town appeared on the horizon, she was exhausted, though determined not to show it. Nathan had been right, but she'd rather die than admit it. Copper Springs was larger than Thea had expected, perhaps 40 buildings arranged along a main street, with smaller dwellings scattered around the outskirts. There was a church, a schoolhouse, several saloons, a general store, and various other businesses. People moved about their daily tasks, pausing occasionally to watch the newcomers approach. "Not what you're used to in Boston," Nathan commented as they rode down the main street. "No," Thea agreed, "but it has a certain charm." Nathan helped her dismount in front of a whitewashed building with a sign identifying it as Dr. Franklin's office and residence. Thea's legs wobbled treacherously, and she was grateful for Nathan's steadying hand on her elbow. "I need to see to a few things," he said. "I'll introduce you to Dr. Franklin, then meet you at Whitaker's General Store in an hour. Will that suit you?" Thea nodded, suddenly nervous about being left alone in this strange town. Dr. Elijah Franklin proved to be a courtly older gentleman with a silver beard and kind eyes. After Nathan explained the situation, the doctor examined Thea thoroughly, pronouncing her remarkably resilient. "You're lucky Mr. Keller found you when he did," Dr. Franklin said, as he rebandaged her still-healing feet. "Another day in that desert, and we'd be having a very different conversation." "I know," Thea said quietly. "I owe him my life." The doctor regarded her thoughtfully. "Nathan's a good man. Keeps to himself mostly, but always first to help when there's trouble. This town owes him more than most realize." "What do you mean?" Dr. Franklin checked to ensure the door was closed before continuing. 2 years back, when the Coulter gang first came to these parts, they hit Copper Springs hard, killed our sheriff, burned half the businesses on Main Street, terrorized the townspeople. Nathan happened to be in town that day. Single-handedly drove them off, shot 2 of the gang members, and wounded Coulter himself. Thea's eyes widened. He never mentioned that. He wouldn't, not his way. The doctor finished his examination and helped Thea to her feet. Town wanted to make him sheriff after that, but he refused, said he wasn't cut out for authority. Thea thanked the doctor and made her way to Whitaker's General Store, her mind buzzing with this new information about her rescuer. The store was a large, cluttered establishment, selling everything from harnesses to hairpins. The proprietor, a round-faced man with impressive mustaches, greeted her enthusiastically when she explained who she was. "Nathan sent word about you last week," Mr. Whitaker revealed. "Asked me to set aside some ladies' necessities. Said you'd been robbed by those Coulter vermin." Thea was touched and a little embarrassed that Nathan had thought so far ahead. Mr. Whitaker showed her to a corner of the store where he'd assembled a collection of women's clothing, 2 simple dresses, undergarments, a shawl, and a pair of sturdy boots. "My wife helped select the items," Mr. Whitaker explained. "She guessed at the sizes, but she's got a good eye for such things." When Thea explained her financial situation, the storekeeper waved away her concerns. Nathan settled the account, said to put everything on his tab. Before Thea could protest, the store's door opened and Nathan entered, accompanied by a distinguished-looking man in a black frock coat. "Miss Larson," Nathan said, "this is Mr. Samuel Garrison, chairman of the town council and the school board." Mr. Garrison bowed slightly. "A pleasure, Miss Larson. Nathan has told me about your predicament and your qualifications. We're in desperate need of a teacher. Our children have been without formal education for nearly 2 months now." Thea straightened her shoulders, suddenly aware of her masculine attire and sun-darkened skin. "I would be very interested in the position, Mr. Garrison, though I must be honest, my credentials were lost in the robbery." "References can be wired for," Mr. Garrison said dismissively. "What matters more is your willingness to take on the challenge. We have 26 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age, with widely varying levels of education. The pay is $30 a month, plus room and board at Mrs. Hollister's boarding house. It was less than half what she would have earned in Tucson, but it was an opportunity. When would you want me to start?" "Monday next, if possible," Mr. Garrison replied. "That gives you 4 days to settle in and prepare. The schoolhouse is well equipped. The previous teacher left all his books and materials. Thea glanced at Nathan, whose expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. I accept, she said firmly. Thank you for this opportunity. After Mr. Garrison departed, Nathan helped Thea select a few additional necessities: paper, pencils, toiletries, and a small reticule. As Mr. Whitaker wrapped their purchases, Thea confronted Nathan. You arranged all this, she said quietly. The job, the clothes, everything. Nathan shrugged. Seemed the simplest solution. You need work. They need a teacher. I can't let you pay for these things, she protested. I already owe you too much. Consider it an investment in Copper Springs' education, he said, a hint of humor in his eyes. I'll deduct it from my taxes. Thea wasn't fooled by his nonchalance. Thank you, she said, touching his arm. Truly. Something flickered in his expression, a warmth quickly suppressed. We should head back, he said briskly. It'll be dark soon, and you need rest before moving to town. The ride back to Nathan's ranch was quieter. Thea was physically exhausted but mentally invigorated. She had a job, a purpose, and a place to stay. Her dream of independence wasn't lost after all. Nathan seemed preoccupied, responding to her comments with brief answers or non-committal grunts. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert, he finally spoke unprompted. Mrs. Hollister runs a respectable establishment. 3 meals a day, clean rooms, strict curfews. She's a bit of a busybody, but she'll look after you properly. You know her well? Everyone knows everyone in Copper Springs. He paused. She lost her husband and son in the war, turned her home into a boarding house afterward. Currently has 2 other boarders, an elderly retired judge, and a young man who works at the assay office. Thea studied Nathan's profile in the fading light. Will I see you after I move to town? He kept his eyes on the trail. I come in for supplies every couple of weeks. I see, Thea said, unable to hide her disappointment. Nathan cleared his throat. Town's hosting a harvest dance next month. Nothing fancy like you'd see back east, but people enjoy it. Thea's heart lightened. Are you asking me to save you a dance, Mr. Keller? The corner of his mouth twitched. Might be. 3 days later, Nathan drove Thea to Copper Springs in his wagon, her new possessions packed in a wooden crate he'd fashioned for her. Mrs. Hollister's boarding house proved to be a large, well-maintained 2-story home near the church. The widow herself was a plump, energetic woman in her 50s who welcomed Thea with genuine warmth. We're so blessed to have a real educated lady teaching our children, Mrs. Hollister gushed as she showed Thea to a small but comfortable bedroom on the 2nd floor. The last teacher, Mr. Phillips, was knowledgeable enough, but he had no patience with the slower students. Thea set her crate on the bed and looked around at what would be her new home. The room was simply furnished: a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a rocking chair near the window that overlooked the main street. Curtains of faded blue calico framed the window, and a rag rug covered most of the wooden floor. It's lovely, Thea said sincerely. Thank you for making space for me. Dinner's at 6 sharp, Mrs. Hollister informed her. Judge Blackburn and Mr. Reed, my other boarders, take their punctuality seriously. She paused at the door. Will Mr. Keller be staying for the meal? I don't think so, Thea replied, ignoring a pang of regret. He mentioned needing to return to his ranch before dark. Mrs. Hollister's expression suggested she had more questions, but she merely nodded and left Thea to unpack. When Thea returned downstairs, she found Nathan in the parlor, hat in hands, looking uncomfortable among the doilies and decorative pillows. He straightened when he saw her. I should be going, he said. Thea walked him to the front porch, aware of Mrs. Hollister watching from the hallway. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the town in golden light. I don't know how to thank you, Thea said, for everything. Nathan shifted his weight. No need. Anyone would have done the same. No, she disagreed gently. Not anyone. What you did finding me, caring for me, arranging all this, it was extraordinary kindness. He looked away, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. You'll do fine here. These are good people, once you get to know them. I hope so. Thea hesitated. Will you, that is, I hope you'll visit when you come to town. Nathan met her eyes then, and Thea saw something in his gaze that made her heart flutter strangely. Count on it, Miss Larson. He placed his hat on his head, tipped it slightly, and descended the porch steps. Thea watched until his wagon disappeared down the street, an odd mixture of anticipation and loss swirling within her. Her first week teaching at the Copper Springs schoolhouse was challenging but rewarding. The students ranged from shy to boisterous, from eager to resistant, but all seemed hungry for knowledge in their own ways. The town families welcomed her warmly, inviting her to Sunday dinners and community gatherings. Mrs. Hollister proved to be a font of local information, filling Thea's ears with the history and gossip of Copper Springs each evening. From her, Thea learned more about Nathan Keller, how he'd arrived in the area 8 years ago. A quiet man with haunted eyes, how he'd worked odd jobs until he saved enough to buy his small ranch, how he kept to himself, except in emergencies, when he could always be counted upon. "Never seen him take an interest in anyone the way he has with you," Mrs. Hollister remarked one evening as she and Thea shelled peas on the back porch. "Caused quite a stir, him bringing you to town like that." Thea felt her cheeks warm. "He saved my life, Mrs. Hollister. There's nothing more to it than that." The widow's knowing smile suggested she thought otherwise. "If you say so, dear, but a man doesn't ride 15 miles each way just to deliver a package of school books on a Tuesday afternoon for just anyone." Nathan had indeed appeared at the schoolhouse 3 days earlier, ostensibly to deliver a box of primers he'd found in Tucson. He'd stayed only long enough to ensure Thea was settling in, well, but his visit had left her strangely breathless for hours afterward. As September gave way to October, Thea found herself fully embraced by the Copper Springs community. She joined the church choir, helped organize a town picnic, and began adult literacy classes 2 evenings a week. Yet, despite her busy schedule and growing circle of friends, she found herself watching the road from Nathan's ranch whenever she had a free moment. He came to town every 10 days or so, sometimes staying only long enough to collect supplies, other times lingering to repair something at the schoolhouse or help with a community project. Each time, he sought Thea out, however briefly, their conversations growing incrementally longer and more personal with each encounter. It was during one such visit, as they walked from the schoolhouse to Mrs. Hollister's after Thea's afternoon classes, that Nathan finally mentioned the upcoming harvest dance. "It's this Saturday," he said, his eyes on the dusty street ahead. "Nothing fancy like I said before, just music and dancing in the church hall." "It sounds wonderful," Thea replied, her heart beating a little faster. "Will you be attending?" Nathan glanced at her, then away. "Thought I might. Don't dance much, but—" He cleared his throat. "Would you allow me to escort you?" Thea couldn't suppress her smile. "I would be honored, Mr. Keller." The harvest dance transformed the usually austere church hall into a festive gathering place. Paper lanterns hung from the rafters, tables laden with food lined the walls, and a small band of local musicians played lively tunes on fiddles, guitars, and a wheezing accordion. Thea wore her best dress, a blue calico with white trim that Mrs. Whitaker had altered to fit her perfectly. Her hair was arranged in a simple but elegant style, adorned with a ribbon that matched her dress. When Nathan arrived to escort her, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt and string tie, Mrs. Hollister had practically beamed with approval. The dance was unlike any social event Thea had attended in Boston. Here, there were no rigid social hierarchies, no elaborate rules of etiquette. Children darted between dancers, old men played checkers in the corner, young couples flirted openly, and matrons gossiped by the punch bowl. It was chaotic, informal, and utterly charming. Nathan proved to be a better dancer than he'd admitted, guiding Thea confidently through several reels and a waltz. During a break in the music, he brought her a cup of punch and led her to a quiet corner. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, the words coming out in a rush, as if he'd been holding them back all evening. Thea felt her cheeks warm with pleasure. "Thank you. You clean up rather nicely yourself, Mr. Keller." "Nathan," he corrected. "After all we've been through, I think we've earned first names, don't you?" "Nathan," she agreed, liking the feel of his name on her lips. "And you must call me Thea. Theodora is so formal." "Thea," he repeated, and something in the way he said it made her pulse quicken. The band struck up another tune, and Nathan set aside his cup. "One more dance?" As they joined the other couples on the floor, Thea became acutely aware of Nathan's hand at her waist, the slight roughness of his palm against her fingers, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. She had danced with many men in Boston's ballrooms, but never had she felt this peculiar combination of comfort and excitement. Later, as Nathan walked her back to the boarding house, the night air cool and stars brilliant overhead, Thea found herself wishing the evening would never end. They paused at the foot of Mrs. Hollister's porch steps, neither seeming eager to say goodnight. "I'm glad you came to the dance," Thea said softly. "So am I." Nathan hesitated, then added, "I'm not much for social gatherings generally." "Why did you come then?" she asked, her heart thundering in her chest. Nathan looked at her directly, his eyes reflecting the porch lantern's glow. "I think you know why, Thea." Before she could respond, the front door opened and Mrs. Hollister's silhouette appeared. "Is that you, Miss Larson? It's getting quite late." The moment broken, Nathan stepped back. "Good night, Thea. I'll see you soon." "Good night, Nathan," she replied, watching as he walked away into the darkness. November brought cooler temperatures and preparations for Thanksgiving. Thea threw herself into her teaching duties, expanding the curriculum to include history, basic science, and even some rudimentary Latin for the older students. The town council, impressed with her dedication, voted to increase her salary to $40 a month, still modest, but enough to allow her to begin saving a little. Nathan's visits to town became more frequent, though always with some practical justification, delivering firewood for the schoolhouse, repairing Mrs. Hollister's porch steps, bringing produce from his garden before the first frost. Each time, he and Thea would find opportunities to talk alone, their conversations ranging from books they'd read to dreams they harbored. "I never planned to stay in Copper Springs," Nathan confessed one Sunday afternoon as they walked along the creek that ran behind the town. "When I first came here, I was just passing through, looking for somewhere to outrun my memories." "What changed your mind?" Thea asked, stepping carefully over a fallen log. Nathan extended his hand to steady her, holding it a moment longer than necessary. "Found I couldn't outrun them anyway. Figured I might as well stop somewhere with a decent view." Thea laughed softly. "And now?" "Now," he looked at her, his expression unexpectedly vulnerable. "Now, I'm glad I stopped here." The first snow fell in early December, transforming Copper Springs into a winter wonderland. Thea, who had experienced many harsh Boston winters, was nonetheless enchanted by the way the desert took on a magical quality under its white blanket. The children were nearly uncontrollable with excitement, and she eventually gave up on formal lessons, instead taking them outside for a lesson in snow physics that devolved into a spirited snowball fight. That evening, as Thea sat by the fire in Mrs. Hollister's parlor grading arithmetic papers, there was a commotion at the front door. Moments later, Nathan appeared, snow dusting his coat and hat, his cheeks reddened from cold. "Nathan!" Thea exclaimed, rising to her feet. "What brings you out in this weather?" "Needed to warn you," he said, his expression grave. "Coulter gang's been spotted near Harper's Crossing, heading this way. Town's organizing a defense committee." Thea's blood ran cold at the mention of the outlaws who had left her to die. "Do you think they'll attack the town?" "Can't say for certain, but they've hit 3 settlements in the last month. With winter coming on, they'll be looking to stock up." Mrs. Hollister appeared with a cup of coffee for Nathan. "Lord preserve us," she said, her usual cheerfulness replaced by worry. "Not again." Nathan accepted the coffee gratefully. "Sheriff's deputized a dozen men. We're setting up watches at all approaches to town." "You're joining the defense committee?" Thea asked, already knowing the answer. He nodded. "I know their tactics better than most." Thea thought of what Dr. Franklin had told her about Nathan's previous encounter with the Coulter gang. "Be careful," she said softly. "Please." Something in her tone made Nathan look at her sharply. Their eyes held for a long moment before he nodded. "Always am." For the next week, Copper Springs existed in a state of tense preparation. Men took turns standing watch. Women gathered supplies and prepared the church basement as a shelter, and children were kept close to home. School continued, but Thea noticed that several fathers escorted their children to and from the schoolhouse, rifles in hand. Nathan stopped by each evening to report that there was still no sign of the gang. On the 8th night, With the town's nerves stretched thin by the waiting, he brought different news. Army patrol encountered them near the territorial border, he told the small group gathered in Mrs. Hollister's parlor. There was a firefight. 2 of the gang were killed, and the rest scattered. Coulter wasn't among the dead, but he was wounded. Collective relief swept through the room. Judge Blackburn, one of Mrs. Hollister's other boarders, raised his teacup in a toast. "To the United States Cavalry!" As the impromptu celebration continued, Thea slipped outside onto the porch, needing a moment of quiet. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant in the black sky. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and breathed deeply. The door opened behind her, and Nathan stepped out. "You all right?" "Yes," she assured him. "Just needed some air." He moved to stand beside her at the porch railing, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Been a tense week." "Yes." Thea hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Were you hoping to encounter them? The Coulter gang, I mean. For what they did to me?" Nathan was silent for a long moment. "Part of me was," he finally admitted. "The part that found you half dead in that desert and has dreamed about it every night since." The raw honesty in his voice made Thea turn to face him. "I dream about it too, but also about what came after you finding me, saving me." Their eyes met, and Thea saw something shift in Nathan's expression, a lowering of barriers, a decision made. He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away if she wished, and touched her cheek with gentle fingers. "Thea," he said, her name almost a question. In answer, she placed her hand over his, holding it against her face. "Nathan?" He drew her closer, hesitating just a breath away. "I'm not a man with much to offer," he whispered. "You've already given me everything that matters," she replied, and closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, a tentative exploration, then deepened as months of unspoken feelings found expression. Nathan's arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him, while Thea's hands moved to his shoulders, steadying herself, as the world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the harvest dance," he confessed. Thea smiled. "I've wanted you to, since before that." The sound of the parlor door opening caused them to step apart quickly. Mrs. Hollister appeared, her expression a mixture of concern and knowing approval. "It's getting quite cold out here," she said mildly. "Perhaps some hot cider would warm you both." As Christmas approached, Copper Springs embraced the holiday spirit with enthusiasm. The general store displayed toys and candies imported from back east. The church choir practiced carols for the Christmas Eve service, and children whispered excitedly about what Santa might bring. Thea threw herself into preparations, helping the older students perform a nativity play and organizing a gift exchange among the school children. In the evenings, she worked on personal presents, a knitted scarf for Mrs. Hollister, bookmarks for her fellow boarders, and for Nathan, a hand-drawn map of his ranch and the surrounding area, painstakingly created based on his descriptions and her own observations during visits. Their courtship, for that was what it had become, progressed with a combination of frontier practicality and genuine romance. Nathan came to town as often as weather permitted, sometimes just for an hour to see Thea, other times staying longer to escort her to community events, or simply walk with her through town. They spoke openly of their growing feelings, neither seeing any purpose in pretense or games. Nathan told her of his life before Copper Springs, his service in the Union Army, the nightmares that still sometimes haunted him, his brief, failed attempt at silver mining in Colorado. Thea shared her own history, her rebellious youth, her struggle to be taken seriously as a woman with intellectual ambitions, her fear that she would never find a man who valued her mind as much as her appearance. "In Boston, women like me are considered odd," she explained one evening as they sat in Mrs. Hollister's parlor, the widow having tactfully retired early. "Too educated, too opinionated, too independent." Nathan's lips curved in a smile. "Out here, those qualities keep you alive. The territory has no patience for weakness, physical or mental." "Is that why you—" Thea hesitated, suddenly shy. "Why you care for me?" He took her hand, his callous thumb tracing circles on her palm. I care for you because you're extraordinary, because you faced death in that desert and came out stronger, because you challenge me and surprise me and make me laugh." His voice softened. "Because when I'm with you, the world makes sense in a way it never has before." Christmas Eve brought heavy snow and temperatures cold enough to freeze the creek solid. The church was packed for the evening service, the congregation's breath visible in the air, despite the pot-bellied stoves burning at each end of the building. Thea, singing with the choir, found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Nathan, seated in the back row. He had never been particularly religious, he'd explained, but wanted to be there to hear her sing. The knowledge warmed her more effectively than any stove. After the service, Nathan escorted Thea back to Mrs. Hollister's for the Christmas Eve supper the widow hosted annually for her boarders and a few selected guests. The meal was festive and abundant: roast goose, mashed potatoes, creamed corn, fresh bread, and mince pies for dessert. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and the occasional toast. As the evening drew to a close, Nathan asked Thea to step outside with him for a moment. On the porch, snow falling gently around them, he handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Merry Christmas," he said, uncharacteristically nervous. "It's not much." Thea unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small wooden box, intricately carved with desert flowers and cacti. Opening the lid, she found a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a book, suspended on a fine chain. "Nathan," she breathed, touched beyond words. "It's beautiful." "Open the book," he urged softly. She discovered that the pendant's tiny silver covers opened to reveal miniature pages, upon which was engraved in nearly microscopic script, "You're not dying here." Tears sprang to Thea's eyes. "The first words you ever said to me." "Words I meant with everything in me," Nathan said, taking her hands in his. "Thea, I'm not an eloquent man, but I need to tell you something. When I found you in that desert, I thought I was saving your life. I didn't realize you'd end up saving mine. Nathan, please let me finish. Before you, I was existing, not living, going through the motions day by day, with no real purpose beyond survival." His grip tightened. "You changed that. You brought light and meaning back into my world." Thea felt her heart expand with joy. "And you've given me a home," she said. "Not just a place to live, but somewhere I truly belong." Nathan reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small, worn velvet box. Thea's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a single small pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing of hers I managed to salvage." He took a deep breath. "Theodora Larson, I love you. Will you marry me?" Thea's answer was immediate and certain. "Yes. Oh yes, Nathan." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms. Their kiss was a promise, a beginning, a declaration of all they had found in each other and all they hoped to build together. Spring came early to the Arizona Territory in 1872. By March, wildflowers carpeted the desert. Cacti bloomed in brilliant colors, and the creek ran high with snowmelt from the distant mountains. In Copper Springs, preparations were underway for the wedding of the school teacher and the rancher, scheduled for the first Saturday in April. The months since Christmas had been busy ones. Nathan had expanded his ranch house, adding a proper bedroom, a larger kitchen, and a small room that would serve as Thea's study. Together, they had selected furniture, curtains, and household necessities, blending his practical sensibilities with her eye for beauty and comfort. The school board had reluctantly accepted Thea's resignation. Effective at the end of the spring term, she had already begun training her replacement, a young woman from Phoenix with teaching experience. In the fall, Thea planned to start a small school at the ranch for the children of neighboring homesteaders, many of whom lived too far from town to attend regular classes. On their wedding day, Copper Springs turned out in full celebration mode. The church was decorated with spring flowers. The reception at the town hall featured food contributed by every family in the community, and even the weather cooperated, providing sunshine and gentle breezes. Thea wore a dress of ivory silk, ordered from San Francisco, with Mrs. Hollister's lace veil. Nathan, uncomfortable but handsome in a new black suit, waited for her at the altar, his expression transforming from nervous to awestruck as she walked down the aisle on Judge Blackburn's arm. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When they exchanged vows, Nathan's voice rang with conviction as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her for all his days. Thea's eyes shimmered with happy tears as she made the same pledge. The reception lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and a seemingly endless stream of well-wishers. As twilight fell, Nathan found Thea speaking with Mrs. Hollister and gently drew her aside. "Time to go home, Mrs. Keller," he said softly. The ride to the ranch was quiet, both of them contemplative after the excitement of the day. When they arrived, Nathan helped Thea from the wagon, then unexpectedly swept her into his arms. "Nathan," she laughed, holding tight to his shoulders. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he replied, mounting the porch steps. "It's tradition." Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, a fire burning in the hearth and lanterns casting a golden glow over the simple furnishings. Nathan set Thea gently on her feet, but kept his arms around her. "Welcome home," he murmured, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache with joy. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, the desert night alive with sounds outside their window, Thea traced the contours of Nathan's face with gentle fingers. "Do you ever think about how unlikely this is?" she asked softly. "That you should find me in that vast desert? That out of all the places in the world, we both ended up here?" Nathan caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I've stopped questioning it. Some things are meant to be, even if the path getting there is hard." Thea nestled closer to him, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I was left to die, but found life instead. Found you." His arms tightened around her. "And I found the other half of myself, the better half." "We found each other," she corrected gently. "And we're not dying here, Nathan Keller. We're just beginning to live." 5 years later. Spring 1877. The morning sun streamed through the curtains of the expanded Keller ranch house, illuminating the breakfast table where Thea was helping 3-year-old Sarah eat her porridge without wearing most of it. At the other end of the table, Nathan was reviewing sums with their 5-year-old son, James, while baby Elizabeth gurgled happily in a cradle nearby. "Papa, is it true that you found Mama in the desert?" James asked suddenly, looking up from his slate. "Billy Johnson at school says you rescued her like a knight in a fairy tale." Nathan glanced at Thea, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "Not exactly like a fairy tale, son, but I did find your mother when she needed help." "Were there dragons?" Sarah asked excitedly, porridge forgotten. Thea laughed. "No dragons, birthday sweetheart. But there was a very brave cowboy who saved a very foolish lady who had gotten herself into trouble." "You weren't foolish," Nathan corrected. "You were a survivor, still are." The ranch had prospered under their joint care. Nathan's horse breeding business had gained a reputation throughout the territory for quality animals, while Thea's small school now served 15 children from the surrounding homesteads. 3 times a week, the children arrived on horseback or in wagons for lessons in the schoolhouse Nathan had built as a wedding anniversary gift 2 years earlier. Copper Springs had grown as well, now boasting a telegraph office, a small hotel, and even a weekly newspaper. The Coulter gang was long gone, its leader finally captured and hanged in Yuma 3 years ago, the remaining members scattered or dead. The territory was slowly being tamed, though it retained enough wilderness to satisfy Nathan's independent spirit. After breakfast, as Nathan prepared to check on a mare about to foal, Thea followed him onto the porch, baby Elizabeth in her arms. The desert stretched before them, beautiful and harsh as ever, but no longer an enemy. Now it was simply home. "I'm thinking of expanding the curriculum," Thea said, shifting the baby to her other hip. "Mrs. Reynolds asked if I could teach her daughters some basic botany. She's trying to establish a kitchen garden and wants them to understand what they're growing." Nathan nodded approvingly. "Good idea. Territory needs more educated women like you." He kissed her forehead, then bent to kiss Elizabeth's downy head. "Don't wait dinner if I'm late. That mare's being stubborn. We'll save you a plate." Thea watched as he strode toward the barn, still lean and strong at 38, his movements confident on the land he loved. James and Sarah burst from the house behind her, eager to begin their day exploring the safe boundaries of the ranch. Thea called after them to stay within sight of the house. then settled in the rocking chair Nathan had built when she was expecting James. As she rocked gently, the baby dozing against her shoulder, Thea thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the refinement of Boston to the unforgiving desert where she'd nearly died, to this life of purpose and love she'd found with Nathan. Not the life she had planned, but infinitely better than anything she could have imagined. In the distance, she could see Nathan emerging from the barn, pausing to watch their children playing near the corral. Even from here, she could sense his smile. He raised a hand in greeting, and she returned the gesture, a silent communication between two people whose lives had become so deeply intertwined that words were often unnecessary. 5 years of marriage had brought challenges, drought, illness, the isolation of winter storms, but never once had Thea regretted her choice. In Nathan, she had found not just a husband, but a partner who respected her mind, valued her strength, and loved her completely. The desert that had once nearly claimed her life had become the backdrop for her greatest happiness. Here, with Nathan and their children, Thea had discovered what it truly meant to be home, not in a place, but in the hearts of those you love. Elizabeth stirred against her shoulder, and Thea began to hum softly, a lullaby her mother had sung to her long ago in a different world. As the baby settled again, Thea's gaze returned to the horizon, to the beauty of the land that had tested her so harshly and rewarded her so richly. "You're not dying here," Nathan had promised on that fateful day. He had been right in ways neither of them could have foreseen. In the Arizona desert, Theodora Larson Keller hadn't found death, but the fullness of life and a love strong enough to transform the wilderness into paradise.